Hello everyone and welcome to a special episode of GodSaw's Turnbuckle, the wrestling video podcast we run over here on youtube.com/UC Campbell. And why is this more of a special episode? Well, let's see if I can point this properly. If you see in the upper, I guess right hand corner over here, we have the little logo there. We are going to be doing some classic pay-per-view reviews here on the channel. I kind of wanted to do something like this for a while, so I figured I would try this weekend with it being Survivor Series weekend as well. And I have decided to go with the classic Survivor Series 1999. This is the infamous Survivor Series where Stone Cold gets hit by a car, which was later revealed to be Rikishi. And they did that in order to, actually get him out of the triple threat match, which we'll tell a little bit of an interesting story about that. Well, matter of fact, we'll tell it right off the bat as well. The interesting story was on this was that WWF at the time kind of knew before going into this match that Austin was not going to be part of the match. They advertised it to kind of get a few more buys out of it, and then they do give you a triple threat to go along with it, and technically Austin is on the show as well, so you technically got what they advertised, but you didn't get the full thing that they advertised. And they did something on the show, of course, to write him off, which I think the story on Bruce Pritchard's podcast was that we'll figure it out now, and it's like, okay, how do we get him out of the match, and then we figure out the story later, style way. So they went with that particular way of getting him out of the match, and also getting him to go have neck surgery as well. So it's one of those interesting ones. Was it a bait and switch? It kind of was, but they also technically got Austin onto the event itself, so they didn't necessarily get false advertisement for it, because they did write him off with the car angle to have him go do neck surgery and then come back 10 months later. So that is one interesting story on there, which we'll talk about another one within the show as well. Honestly, as a whole, this show, going back and watching it, because I did watch it live back in 1999, going back and being able to watch this show again without necessarily going through everything on there, it was definitely an interesting take on this one. And this show just, it's so different from watching a WWE show, a WWE pay-per-view nowadays. I mean, Survivor Series as a whole on Sunday, or pretty much tomorrow, it won't be tomorrow as of the recording, but it will be by the time of the live, or this video going live. The Survivor Series is going to be like, if the main card itself is going to be at least a 4-hour show, and that's where it seems to go for most cases. There's even a chance that it might go 5 hours to go along with it, and they have a 2-hour pre-show to go along with it. These shows back then, it's crazy to see, because I was rewatching this on the network version on that side. And to be 100% honest with you, it's weird to go back and watch a pay-per-view and it'd be less than 3 hours. And it would have been about 3.5 hours if you decided to watch the Sunday Night Heat before the show to go along with it. So it'd be less than 4 hours of a show. And now we've got like 6-hour shows, and they're crazy and they're insanely long. And that's not just WWE. That's kind of wrestling as a whole. Wrestling as a whole, the major shows tend to be about a 4 to 5, even 6-hour experience, which is always an interesting thing to see. Where in the terms of runtime and the terms of what you get back then to now, which I don't know how that really comes off. It comes off maybe as a little bit better, but it also comes off as an aspect of they get a lot into this 2 hours and 38 minutes that they have on this particular Survivor Series. They really did. And some of it for the better, some of it for the worst. to go along with that, because they had 10 matches on the show, and you had pretty much a segment back, like some kind of backstage segment for the most part after each match, especially after the Austin getting hit by a car. So let's get right into it. The first match was a traditional Survivor Series elimination tag team match. These were, for the night, all elimination tag team matches were 4-on-4s. So this one was the Godfather, and it was D'Lo Brown and the Headbangers. Funny aspect to this one, all of them come out dressed pretty much in some kind of night attire, basically attire that you would expect if you were going to some kind of club or something to go along with that. They played it off as, of course, Godfather being, and this would totally not work today, at least not now. I don't think. Of course, Godfather playing a pimp in this one, pretty much on that. And of course, D'Lo Brown and the Headbangers dress kind of like the Godfather to go along with it. The Headbangers have giant afros on for theirs. And they went up against the Dudley Boys and the Acolytes. This was probably, out of all the Survivor Series matches for the night, was probably my favorite one on there. They definitely told a pretty interesting story, especially a story of the Dudleys and the Acolytes just eventually not getting along inside of the match. It starts out really good for their team, with Bradshaw eliminating Thrasher with a clothesline from hell, but you continually see blind tags throughout the entire match that neither the Dudleys or the Acolytes are really liking, and this is before they were known as the APA. But it continues to go pretty well for that team when Mosh gets eliminated by Bubba Ray Dudley from a 3D. Eventually, there's a lot of miscommunication going along in the match, and eventually Bradshaw eliminates himself via DQ with a chair shot to D'Lo Brown, and then he just goes completely crazy and hits Bubba with a chair as well. This causes Farouk and Devon to start fighting with each other. They fight to the back, so they're essentially getting counted out. There's an interesting spot in here where Bubba Ray Dudley hits a top rope powerbomb to D'Lo Brown for a 2 count. We would complain now for that being for only being a 2 count, but that happened back in 1999 as well. Only a 2 count off of a top rope powerbomb. Eventually, Bubba Ray would get eliminated from this. Get eliminated as the final 2 people are the Godfather and D'Lo Brown. He does. Bubba gets hit with a splash in the corner, and then D'Lo Brown hits the lowdown frog splash to pick up the victory. And like I said, there's a few other Survivor Series elimination matches on this show, and honestly, I thought this was probably the best one of them. Though there's another decent one in there as well to go along with it. The other ones were kind of some of these matches right off the bat were very meh, to say the least. They were rapid fire matches. You didn't really get any meat to the matches until much later in the show. Up next, you had a Kurt Angle video package. This was also Kurt Angle's first match in WWF, and it was on pay-per-view, and he was going up against Shawn Stasiak. I love the aspect of Kurt Angle's video package back in the day, saying, you know, he's the most celebrated real athlete, he's trying to play up as much as babyface as possible, but you can totally tell the guy's going to be a heel. At that point, even at that point in time, you could just tell the guy was going to be a heel. So Kurt Angle comes out. Of course, Kurt Angle's always had the same music in WWE and WWF. So it's hard to not think about that music and not think of the "You suck" chant every single time the beat comes on in there. And of course, this is Kurt Angle's first match. A lot of this match was a lot of the basics and a lot of him showing what he can do and what he would do as an amateur wrestler. It does get to the point that the Crowd does start chanting "Let's go Red Wings." They are in Detroit, Michigan, for this one, so there is a big "Let's go Red Wings" chant going on in the arena. Eventually Kurt grabs the mic and starts running down the crowd for booing an Olympic gold medalist. This is great stuff and fully solidifying him as a heel. I absolutely loved that aspect of this one. Fun little note of this match, because there was a bit of back and forth and Stasiak was getting some offense in. Shawn Stasiak, even back then in 1999, before Brock Lesnar even got into the WWE in any way, shape, or form, he had a variation of the F5 as well, and actually used it on Kurt in this match. But Kurt does eventually hit the angle slam, which he was using at that time, which he did use pretty much the entire time, to pick up the victory. Interesting note here is that Shawn Stasiak kind of no-sells the effects of the angle slam afterwards. And you kind of get him doing kind of like getting up right away. And it was like, and doing like, as Kurt starts celebrating his victory to go along with it. It was always an interesting note because there was always a lot of talk around this time that Stasiak had a lot of heat backstage. This might have been one of those things that he had heat for basically no selling the finish of this match. It's hard to really tell on that particular side of everything. Up next, you had the another Survivor Series elimination tag team match, which was Val Venus, Mark Henry, Gangrel, and Steve Blackman going up against the British Bulldog and the Mean Street Posse. I love the aspect of commentary saying, especially for the team of Blackman, Henry, Val Venus, and Gangrel, it's like these guys seem to not have any connection with each other in any way, shape, or form. It seems like a mishmash of a team. It seems like it was a match that was thrown together, and that's kind of how it felt. Even to the point that there was a lot of miscommunication at the beginning. Bulldog starts the match, does a couple of moves, and tags out. One of the Mean Street Posse, I think it was Pete Gas, comes back in, or comes in, does one move, tags Bulldog back in, and things just looked confusing right off the bat with this particular one. You did see the eliminations pretty much really quick of the Mean Street Posse, with Pete Gas getting eliminated by Steve Blackman, and then Rodney gets eliminated by Gangrel with an implant DDT, and then Joey Abs does get eliminated by Mark Henry, but not before he does a power spot where he lifts Mark Henry and does a slingshot style maneuver on the top rope to him. Was actually looking kind of impressive in that one, but he does get eliminated by Mark Henry eventually. At this point, Bulldog does fight back a little bit. It's weird because Bulldog is considered a heel in this sense, yet he is starting to fight back kind of valiantly as a babyface, even eliminating Gangrel and Steve Blackman before getting beaten by Val Venus with the top rope splash that he called the money shot at the time. Again, something that probably wouldn't really work nowadays, based off of some of the characters. Things that worked in the Attitude Era might not work so well today, at least in the terms of advertiser side and everything to go along with that, on that side of everything. Overall, I thought this match was kind of all over the place. It wasn't all that great. It was probably one of my least favorite of the Survivor Series style matches. Up next, you had a 8-woman tag match. This is an interesting one, as all the other 4-on-4s were elimination style matches, but this one was only a 1-fall match, and it did not last long. It was Mae Young, Fabulous Moolah, Tori, and Deborah going up against Jacqueline, Luna, Terry Reynolds, and Ivory. This match was pretty much a brawl right off the bat. Again, it was a 1-fall finish. Moolah attacks Ivory right off the bat. The bell rings. Eventually they throw Moolah out of the ring, and she was the technical one starting the match. The way Tori tags into the match is completely ridiculous. It was Tori got off of the ring apron on her side of the ring, runs over to the heel side of the ring on the outside, grabs Moolah's hand and tags, and she runs back into the ring. That's how she tagged in to the match. It was a little bit ridiculous. A lot of this match was done outside of the ring. It was all over the place. Eventually, Moolah picks up a victory over Ivory in what was about 2 minutes. It was not long in any way, shape, or form. So up next, we do have one of our first backstage interviews of the night, which was Lillian Garcia was interviewing X-Pac right before his match with Kane. He basically runs down Kane in every way, shape, or form, and basically saying he carried that team with him and Kane. This is the point where DX has gotten back together, and they're full-on heel. They're not necessarily doing their traditional antics of DX from back in the day. They were just kind of power hungry to go along with that, with Triple H leading them. And of course, this is right before everything went down with Stephanie McMahon joining up with them as well on that one. He runs down Kane throughout the entire interview, says he doesn't know what Tori even sees in him, everything to go on that side. A basic interview going into the match. The match itself between Kane and X-Pac was actually a pretty decent match, but again, it kind of falls in that aspect of everything was kind of all over the place. I did like the beginning of the match where X-Pac attacks Kane as he's setting off the pyro and playing pretty much a hit and run style hit and run style match. Basically big guy versus the smaller guy. So X-Pac is using his speed to get around the power of Kane. Kane eventually does do a sit-up from a spinning heel kick. So he gets a spinning, X-Pac hits a spinning heel kick on him. Kane sits up from that. And Kane, or eventually X-Pac gets him back into the corner to go for the Bronco Buster, but Kane catches him and sets him up for a chokeslam. This causes Road Dogg to actually come down to start trying to make the save. Kane does dispatch of him and hits a chokeslam to Road Dogg, but this allows X-Pac to hit an X Factor on Kane himself, and eventually Kane gains control of the match again, and this causes Triple H to come out and cause the DQ by hitting Kane with the title. So you have Road Dogg and X-Pac and not Billy Gunn, because Billy Gunn doesn't show up until the actual tag team match later in the show, which was a very interesting one. Interesting little story tidbit that they might have been going for a little bit later on in the show. And Tori eventually comes down to kind of try to stop them from doing what they're doing. She turns X-Pac around and he does a spinning heel kick, knocking Tori out, and Kane chases them off as he checks on Tori to finish it. Again, I thought this was actually a pretty good match. It was, of course, it did have the screwy finish on there. This was pretty much the first match of the night that had a screwy style finish, and it, like I said, the match itself came off pretty good. Don't always care about DQ finishes on pay-per-views, but you know, they're telling the story that they were going with and probably going to another pay-per-view with it on that side of everything. So it was what it was. Up next, you had another Survivor Series elimination tag match. This was going to be Prince Albert, Mideon, Big Viscera, and the Big Boss Man going up against the Big Show, and he was supposed to have tag team partners in Kai and Tai and the Blue Meanie, but during Sunday Night he destroys all of them. And also to make mention, this is during the midst of the time where Big Show was having a feud with the Big Boss Man, and they incorporated Big Show's father's death and funeral to go along with it. Though it had happened many years beforehand, they played a storyline to go along with it, and they had actually already done the bit where Boss Man actually interrupts the funeral and drags the casket with Big Show on top of it, with the police car. So they had already done that. So Big Show is completely irate throughout this entire aspect of 1999, and So Big Show comes out on fire. He eliminates Albert, Midian, and Viscera within about a minute to minute and a half, all with choke slams. And Boss Man basically was like, peace out, and I'm gone. The crowd's going absolutely mental at this point. It was quick and effective for what it needed to be. Yeah, it wasn't a great match, but the crowd was going absolutely crazy during all this, and it came off really, really good. So during this time frame, and actually right before the match with Big Show, you did have Michael Cole interviewing, and this is back before he was doing commentary, so he's doing interviewing at that time. He interviewed The Rock on the title match a little bit later in the night, which almost gets immediately interrupted by Triple H. They start brawling for a bit. It does get broken up. It was kind of a little bit awkward where they were going with everything on that one, on that side of it. And then right after the Big Show match after he destroys everybody, again, there was another interview. This time it was with Stone Cold, and this is where everything goes down. So Triple H interrupts. They brawl. Austin starts chasing Triple H. And then you have these weird little cuts to different things. They have a cut to where X-Pac and Road Dogg are running out into a garage area. And then they cut to Triple H running, and he's kind of going out there as well. And they finally get to Stone Cold coming in and going out there and looking for him. And then the door shuts, and when they cut in there, there's like no seamless transition to it. They cut to where Austin is standing out there looking for them, trying to find where they were at. And then lo and behold, lights turn up on a car. It runs through a mesh fencing and hits Austin and speeds away. That's where everything we talked about earlier came from. Of course, Vince comes out there. You have Stephanie and Shane. You have Test out there. Eventually, JR's out there as the EMTs are going ahead and attending to Stone Cold and getting him to the hospital. It was a very interesting thing when watching it live, and then watching it, thinking live, and then thinking, watching it later, knowing, watching it later after, rewatching it again, to go along with it. It was a very interesting maneuver that they went with, and I guess they were coming up with an idea for something that would guarantee Austin would not come back from, because there have been plenty of times where Austin had been beaten down in the past and taken out on an ambulance, only to return the same night. So I guess they were coming up with an idea that would make for Austin, like, there was no way Austin could come back in any way, shape, or form. So it was an interesting bit on there. We talked about that at the beginning of the show, where WWF knew that Austin was not going to be in this match. But they did advertise Austin to be on the show the entire time, even though they knew he was more likely not going to be in the match, and they wrote him off this way on the show. DX does confront out there as well. Vince is irate. Everyone's irate. They think they did it. They're denying it, everything on that side. And they do cut for another match. Interesting note, because the next match was Chris Jericho versus China for the Intercontinental title. This was it was interesting because they as Jericho's music was beginning to play, JR is just running out to the ring, and he runs right by the pyro section right before it goes off as well. This match starts off pretty much with a brawl, and a lot of this does start on the outside of the ring. Jericho even pushes Chyna's valet, who was Miss Kitty at the time. It was Jerry Lawler's wife at the time, Stacy Carter, I believe. At that time, he shoves her down. Again, back when WWF was doing a little bit more intergender stuff than they do even now at this point in time. The closest thing you get to any kind of intergender action is the mixed match challenge, and it's not a case where a male will hit one of the females. Usually it will be the other way around. Here, of course, with China holding the Intercontinental title, which would lead to a completely different section. Much of this match, like I said at the beginning, was fought on the outside of the ring. Jericho was using the barricades and everything on that side to try to gain the control, and he does have control for a good chunk of the match. Jericho gets China back into the ring and hits a missile drop kick. China does start fighting back. She even hits a pedigree at one point in time, a normal pedigree, which Jericho kicks out of, which is interesting to note that she is using the pedigree at this time still as a potential finishing maneuver at that moment. Again, they continue a bit of back and forth, everything on that side. One note here, this was definitely an interesting one because China was always a very popular character, but in this particular match, the crowd was about 50-50, and there was a lot of Jericho chants going on. Jericho had just started about 3 months ago at that time, and there were a lot of Jericho chants going on, wanting him to win this particular match. Jericho does counter a Hurricane attempt, or a Frankenstein attempt to a Walls of Jericho, which China does fight and get to the ropes. There's a little bit more back and forth, and eventually Jericho sets up for a superplex, which Miss Kitty gets back up on there to distract the referee. China hits a low blow and hits a top rope pedigree to win the match. That's right, doing a top rope pedigree to finish off the match. I thought this was actually a pretty good match, honestly, for them. Jericho worked really nice, and this worked really good in this match. So did China. I thought they put on a pretty good match here, and China does keep the Intercontinental title. Up next, you had a segment with Triple H and Shane McMahon. So you had Shane McMahon in a locker room or office area. Triple H walks in. Again, they accuse Triple H of doing what happened. And it's like, dude, I didn't do that. Like, we had a plan to take out Austin, but we wouldn't go that far with it. That was kind of their excuse. And they were being all serious about it. But as Triple H was going to leave, he nonchalantly goes to Shane, which sets him off. It's like, so it's no longer going to be a triple threat, right? I mean, Austin's not going to be here. And of course, Shane just tells them to leave. We're figuring something out. So, after this, you had what was the final Survivor Series elimination tag match for the night. It was Crash and Hardcore Holly teaming up with Too Cool to go up against Edge, Christian, and the Hardys. This was a very fast-paced action match. Probably my second favorite one of the Survivor Series elimination matches. Right behind the first match of the night, with the Dudleys and the Acolytes and the Godfather and D'Lo Brown and the Headbangers. I thought they worked really well. There wasn't much of a story going on. You did have a little bit where they continued with the Holly cousins continually fighting each other, Crash and Hardcore. And it kind of almost cost them the match in the end. It does get to a point that it was Christian versus Grandmaster Sexay, Crash, and Hardcore Holly, where Christian fights back and actually eliminates Grandmaster and Crash Holly in the match, and eventually succumbs to a counter roll-up to Hardcore Holly, and they pick up the victory in this match. I thought this was pretty good. Jeff was showing a little bit of different high-flying moves at that time. He even did a 450 splash in this one. Scotty 2 Hotty actually did a top rope DDT. So he jumped off the top rope to hit a DDT to eliminate Matt Hardy in this match. There was a lot of fast-paced work in this particular match. And I thought it came off pretty good on that side. They do cut to Shane backstage. And they basically were asking for an update on Austin. They said he wasn't going to be here, but there was still going to be a triple threat match tonight. It's just not going to be with Stone Cold Steve Austin on that one. So this leads us to a tag team title match. And it leads us to a tag team title match. And it was going to be the New Age Outlaws going up against Mankind and Al Snow. Interesting note. I think Foley had even said this at one point, that this was originally going to be his last match. Before everything went down with Austin, where he convinced Vince to let him do a few more matches, and it got him into the title picture, leading to the Hell in a Cell match where he does retire, but then comes back a month later. So this was originally supposed to be his last match, but it ended out, of course, not being on that one, because Mankind had made mention to Mick Foley had made mention to Vince that he was having some short-term memory loss, and Vince was like, okay, you're done. But he does convince him to do a little bit more, obviously more afterwards, and we saw where that always went with Mick Foley on that one. This match itself, I thought, was a pretty decent match. For the most part, it was the New Age Outlaws actually working almost as the baby faces, even though they were the heels. Interesting note is that they did have that this was the first time Billy Gunn was even seen throughout the show. So they were, I guess, planting seeds that, hey, maybe Billy Gunn was the one who ran over Stone Cold. Another little interesting tidbit, because this kind of took from a lot of these other matches. A lot of the matches on commentary, they started it off with like JR being super somber about the matches, and Jerry's getting on his case for not getting into the match. And then he starts getting into the match, and then he gets on his case throughout the night for being unsympathetic towards his friend. And it's like, wait, so what am I supposed to do? Type of thing. So that did take away from some of these particular matches and everything. This match itself, like I said, it was interesting to see that Road Dogg was kind of working from behind the entire time. He was basically the babyface in this one, where Mankind and Al Snow were kind of playing the heel to a certain degree, because they had the advantage, eventually leading to Road Dogg getting the hot tag on Billy Gunn. It was interesting to see the baby faces work from the main control, and then see the heels have to make the comeback to go along with that. But the New Age Outlaws do eventually pick up the victory over Mankind. They get rid of Al Snow, and then they hit Mankind with a spike pile driver to pick up the victory. I thought it was actually a pretty decent match. It was interesting to see it work the opposite way that you would traditionally see a tag team match work, at least in the terms of the heel face dynamic. So this leads us to the triple threat match, and it was going to be Rock going up against Triple H, and who was their mystery opponent? It was the Big Show. That's right. After Big Show had done what he had done earlier in the show, he is actually input into the title match here. And I liked how Fink reacted to it, because he even acted surprised that it was Big Show when he hit, and then immediately announces him and gets out of the ring. I absolutely thought that was great. It made it like a little bit extra surprise, like, oh, not even Howard Finkel knew this was coming. On that one, Triple H and Rock worked together right off the bat to try to eliminate Big Show, but eventually Show does gain control over them. Oddly enough, Rock goes for a people's elbow on Big Show very early on in the match, which Triple H does stop the fall on that one. It was interesting because most of the time Rock would only do the people's elbow after he had done a spine buster or the rock bottom, and he usually waited very late in the match to do it. It was interesting to see him do it this early on in the match, kind of to tease that, hey, maybe this match is over with that quickly. But it, of course, was not. Show and Triple H do fight up the walkway. Rock gets like a running head start and does a massive clothesline to Big Show. And Triple H and Rock start fighting around. This was an interesting little bit, because Rock was doing his traditional punches. He was right by an equipment table as well, and he goes to do the last one where he does the spit and then hits, and the person jumps. Triple H jumps, hits a table that has some equipment, and the table just breaks to go along with that. It was like, it was one of those unintentional funny moments on that one. And it was just an interesting little snippet to the match itself. They do eventually all fight back to ringside. The you have Show back in control again, but Rock grabs the ring bell and hits Show with the ring bell, and then allows Triple H and Rock to suplex him through the Spanish announce table, and they finally get back into the ring. This is... And then you have a good amount of back and forth, because Show was out for a good chunk of the match afterwards. So you have a good chunk of back and forth between Rock and Triple H. But eventually Earl Hebner gets taken out when Triple H throws Rock into him. Rock does hit a rock bottom, and but Shane comes out to be the new referee. I failed to mention this in there, but Vince had left the arena to go attend with Austin, but he was also supposed to be the guest referee in the match. So Shane comes out to be the ref, and he counts for a 2 count on that one, and Triple H was able to kick out, or was not able to kick out, but Show actually pulls Shane McMahon out, and eventually they do get a little bit of control over Show again, and then Triple H notices Shane there being the referee. He ends up pedigreeing Shane, which causes DX to come out and start beating down both Rock and Big Show. During this time frame, Vince comes back. So Vince had come back. He runs down to the ring as Show is getting rid of X-Pac and Road Dogg. He picks up the title belt that was brought into the ring, and swings at Triple H, misses. Show acts like he's going for a punch, which causes Triple H to go right back into Vince, who hits him with the title, and then choke slam from Big Show. 1, 2, 3, Vince makes the count, and Big Show picks up the victory and the WWF title on that one. I thought this was actually a quite entertaining triple threat match for what everything was on that one. But again, much like most of this show, it was very much all over the place, and it was kind of hard to really say whether or not it was good just based off of the actual in-ring action or the storytelling, which I felt like the storytelling in the match was actually quite good. But the match itself completely always felt all over the place, like much of this show as well. So overall, I felt the show was a pretty good one. I thought it was a pretty good one in the end. Not many of these matches were all that great to begin with, but they did pick up throughout time, and I thought it came off pretty good as well. I did think it came off pretty good as well to go along with it throughout out there, but a good chunk of these matches were just kind of not all that great, but we did get some pretty good ones in there. I did enjoy the first Survivor Series tag team match. I also did enjoy the one with the Hollies and Too Cool going up against Edge, Christian, and the Hollies. I thought the match with Mankind and Al Snow and the New Age Outlaws were pretty good. The match with Chyna and Chris Jericho was a pretty good match as well. And I did enjoy the main event overall to go along with that. It was an interesting rewatch where a lot of those early matches right before Chyna and Jericho were just, outside of that opening match, all those other matches there were just meh. They weren't much of anything. Though the whole bit with Big Show I thought was good because it showed him as a crazy, not crazy, but just as a dominant force, and it really got the crowd into it. On that side, the crowd does die a bit after the bit with Stone Cold, but I mean, then again, you just saw a person get hit with a car. You're not going to react to too much, though they start getting back into it a little bit more during the Jericho Chyna match, more towards the end. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good show. And it'll be interesting to see what which particular show I decide to do next, because I think we'll start doing more classic shows from time to time. Maybe we'll start dabbling outside of the WWE area as well. I mean, there's plenty of pay-per-views to go through. That's ECW or WCW. Many of those I've yet to ever watch in any way, shape, or form. So with that being said, that is my first go at a classic pay-per-view here on the channel. I hope you guys enjoyed everything. I did kind of enjoy it, and I think we may do this on a once-a-month basis. We'll see how everything works out with that, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care, and peace out.